And that is just right in line with what I was talking about, how this is related to shape shifting, which is also just transformation in a lot of ways. So that's what happens as you do the work, as you create sacrifice, as you commit to your labors or your task, as you break through your inertness and you find your momentum, you create change within yourself, you create transformation. The task, the work is what transforms you in a way.
So, I think this is all, it's very much about the engagement with the suffering, basically. And I don't necessarily think, like a lot of modern philosophies, that there's this attempt of liberation from suffering. You have to engage with and integrate that suffering. You have to actually labor beneath the tree to gain that knowledge.
And that's something that I try to impress upon people all the time, is that you can't be a spectator in your life. You can't, and so much of what our industrialized world wants to do and why it's so important for us to reawaken the ways of our ancestors is because the modern world wants you to be complacent. It wants you to sit, it wants you to just consume content and be a spectator to your life, allow life to happen around you. And how do you break through all that? You do the work. Thank you, everyone, for joining me here again at Duality. This is Raudaz, and we are coming at you with a whole new set of trees, poems, herbs, and a bit of knowledge about the history, spirituality, spiritual significance of these wild native plants to Northern Europe, the magical elements to them, and the perspectives that the Norse and Celtic cultures had on them, maybe from a aerial view. As I was mentioning that, before, I think I mentioned that we were going to go over the ash and the oak, but that was incorrect. We're actually doing the ash and the hawthorn. And recently I found out that, through some of my research, I found out that one of the most sacred groves you could find yourself within, based off of a Celtic perspective, when you can find these trees growing around you, are the ash, the hawthorn, and the oak. If you find yourself in the presence of that, you're truly in a magical place. And those are the trees. Those trees actually precede each other in the Ogham. So there's probably no coincidence that they have been lined up in that sort of fashion. But for anybody joining us back here today, just a brief understanding of what I believe the Ogham is and why we're going over this knowledge. The Ogham is basically a set of land knowledge tied to symbols. So this is just an ancient form of tying, or even probably a bit of a modern form, but tying knowledge to basic symbols, tying the spiritual significance and cultural significance to the living world. So when we talk about things like the ash and the hawthorn, like we do today, really we can really access the early culture by understanding the Ogham that represents them and what they mean. When we understand that the trees and herbs sort of reflected the nature of the culture in the ways that they were used and the ways they interacted with them. So that's the one way that we can actually go about understanding how we can live more like our ancestors, is by understanding these ancient, ancient descendants of the green world that have been around a lot longer than we have. So just getting started, I was going to go ahead and roll into it. We're starting off with the ash tree, and I'm reading a bunch of notes that are from a while ago, and I put these together. Let's see, make sure we don't have any chat. Yeah, okay, that was just from you. All right. So yeah, getting into it, going on to the ash, or how it would be pronounced as neon, I believe so. I have the actual Celtic pronunciations. Actually, it's just pronounced neen, but it's spelled Nion or Nuin, but it's pronounced as neen. And this is an old Irish pronunciation. I've been trying to include these more, but even the Latin is the Fraxinus excelsior. And what we've got going here is basically the ash tree is scientifically known as the Fraxinus excelsior in the European variety. And it's a large deciduous tree that can grow up to about 130 feet, even 150 feet in height. Sorry if I'm not getting the Queen's math on that one for you guys, but it has a straight pole-like structure. And what's so great, we'll go into why that's great, but it's important to know that the ash is one of those trees that grow very, very straight. And it's usually got a smooth greenish gray bark to it. that cracks and obviously fissures with age, like most trees, and the branches are often widely spaced out. I do have an ash tree behind me, but this is obviously in a failing into winter time. But we'll see that it grows with compound leaves on opposite stalks. So you're going to see them growing in a sort of like opposite pattern. Some trees grow in a diverted pattern. These grow opposite each other. And they have phallic shaped buds that are known as keys when they come in bunches. That's what they're referred to as. When I reference them throughout this, they're referred to as keys. We've got listeners. All right, that's cool. As long as you're here, that's great. If you want to chime in with the typing, you can. Try to answer any questions you have. So one interesting thing about it is that the ash tree adapts to various climates and conditions and prefers a lime-rich soil where it's got the ability to go deep and spread its roots wide. I mean, this is a massive tree, and there's some semblance in the Norse culture of how that took shape, how it shaped some of the Norse culture as we move on into it when we talk about the nine realms. It's a very adaptive tree. It likes a lot of room to grow, and the surrounding soil, it can out compete a lot of things around it. So it can actually strangle and reduce the amount of life that's around it because it's such a, I would say, a carnivorous tree, but it's a hungry tree and it stakes its claim and it stands where it wants to stand. It doesn't let anything else really kind of push against it. So there's that nature of being quite present and strong in its environment. It's got a white wood. It's strong, pliable, and excellent for burning. It's a great wood to, keep through the winter, things like that. And even when it's green, even when it's like a fresh bit of wood, you can still make use of it in fires and so forth. Some of the folk names for these are Neen in the Celtic tradition, and then throughout places like with the Anglo-Saxons and in the Old Norse, they would refer to it as Ask, and that will tie into some of the creation myth that we have with the Old Norse. And the Swedish and Danish, they will actually refer to it as Askelketen. Oh, wait, Ask a Slekten. Ask a Slekten. And in the modern Norwegian, they pronounce it the same as the Old High German, which is Ask. And the modern German is Esha. Just a little bit of background. Did a lot of research on these ones. Getting better at it as we go through these trees. And it's associated with the deities such as Odin, right? Or Woden. And I think we all kind of know that, but for people that don't, there's quite an important story associated with the ash tree and Odin's revelations, often referred to or known as a perennial tree. Some of the more notable species are the Fraxus ornus, which is known as the manna ash, which exudes a sweet honey-like sap, historically fermented into, let's see, did we get something here? Nah, it's something else. The manna ash will secrete like a sweet honey-like sap, and it would be fermented into what we refer to as manna. That's what they would call it, the MANNA. Until about the 20th century, and it was possibly linked to ancient drinks like soma or something people would refer to it or thought it had something to do with Odin's mead or some of the stories of Odin's mead and what he would do with it. The couple other ones, there's the American white ash, there's the black ash, and we'll move on from some of this basic introduction here in just a moment. Interesting enough, when we went over the rowan's actually referred to as a mountain ash. I have to check back on it to see if it's in the Fraxus genus, but botanically, it symbolizes the axis mundi, which bridges, in a basic sense, bridging the earth and sky. It's quite clear to see that, when we look at imagery of basic trees, like I have, stuff right here. This is obviously, I don't know, when you get like basic imagery of trees, they usually stand isolated, representing like a connection between the sky and earth. And that's going to come up in the video that I'm working on here soon, or I have coming along. I'll post some stuff about it soon, but the symbolism is what we want to get into next. The ash tree symbolizes, in most cultures, we're referring to the Celtic and the Norse currently, it's symbolizing transformation, fate, willpower, protection, cosmic connectivity, and resilience. And, you can probably see some of that just based off that original description that I gave there of the tree as a tree, not any of the spiritual elements about it or anything like that. It often represents those in history, the shapeshifters and those who work with manifestation. It often is a part of stories that embody cycles of change and personal evolution through crisis specifically. So through like a crisis moment. And the pursuit usually always in a lot of stories has something to do with the pursuit of like a destined path. It has a lot to do with fate when you're looking at some of the stories that we'll go over. One thing is that when people want to talk about resonating with a tree, or trying to find inspiration from something in nature like that, the ash is a good one to sit down and research. If you are the kind of person who's feeling inert, if you're feeling stuck, you're not going anywhere, it's hard to get out of the situation that you're in. I'm not going to be one of those people that tells you, hey, you need to go out there and hug this tree, give it a nice kiss, bless it, do all this stuff, put offerings underneath it. No, I'm going to say that you should simply start researching it. Go about it in a practical way, start doing practical work with it, start understanding how to, perhaps do some woodworking with its, as I mentioned before, it's a straight wood. It's got a direction, right? We'll go into more of the spiritual stuff, but when you're a type of person who's dealing with the stuckness that we can feel in life these days, definitely start turning your attention to an ash tree, learning about it, learn what it looks like. And then as you go about yourself in the world, this is what I talk about being like, the trees of the Olam are like the world diviners. They align you with, they reveal your synchronicity in the world. They help you maintain your synchronicity. Start looking for the ash tree. If you're looking for a way out of the mud, start studying that. Anyways, moving on. It basically encourages taking control and expanding on reality in a positive way, working with visualization and ritual. We'll go into some of those too. But here's an interesting fact: in the Proto-Indo-European, the word Oz, or might be pronounced differently. I don't have the actual translation for this, but OS, it's just pronounced Oz, I believe, was for ash. It was often used in terms for spears, lances, and javelins. So when the Proto-Indo-Europeans from the reconstructed language, when they were referred to their weaponry, like their long phallic weaponry as Oz, it was the same word for ash and those weapons like spears and so forth. And we'll go over it. It's because ash is one of the best trees to make a spear from. If you're going to get a spear, you're going to buy one, get it made from ash. It's because the wood itself is so straight, and you can even make it even straighter by doing like a steam press on it or a steam bath on it to give it an even straighter pull through it. But then when we think about what a spear does, we want it to fly straight. We want it to go straight. We want it to meet its mark. That's why it is a good tree for getting yourself out of a stuck position, launching yourself. Those who have failure to launch, look into ash. It's often linked to martial themes, and thank you. I think it's interesting as well. Linked to martial themes and tribes such as the Fir one of the invading tribes of Ireland. That might have meant something like men of the spear. Or there's the Gaelion, or they were Gaelion, or were the spears of wounding. Another tribe, I believe. And then in Irish lore, it signifies sovereignty and pride. The ash tree signifies sovereignty and pride throughout the 5 sacred trees of Ireland, 3 of which were ashes. There's the ash of Tortu, the bough of Dathi, and the ash of Ush Neo. Hopefully I'm getting those right. Known as the Bilu, or the sacred symbols whose destruction was a profound insult. So these were the trees that tribes would often set themselves up around certain types of trees, right? Because the oaks support the most life in nature. Ash, you set yourself up around ash, you're going to get branches. You have to work with it to produce spears and such for your tribe. If an invading tribe comes to you, wrecks you, and you evacuate, and what do they do to cripple you? What would they do in the Celtic cultures? They would cut down your tree. They would cut down the tree that was like the pinnacle of your society, right? Where you're a warring society, you're near an ash tree, or if you're, a crafting society, you're near an oak or something like that. The best thing they could do is cut down your tree, because that was your connection to the earth and your success. But moving along, so I have a bit in here about Maeve, but I'm just not going to touch on that quite yet. The ash tree is one of those trees that is considered to attract lightning, or what refers to as drawing the flash, or it draws the flash. And it was used in early rain magic. Working with the ash tree in a spiritual sense usually has something to do with trying to draw in that weather that was a nourishing weather. Like we talked about before, when lightning strikes, it injects nitrogen into the soil, which is great for farming, and it's great for the surrounding life. And I posited a theory about what happens when a giant tree with deep root systems gets struck by lightning. Does it follow like it does in a human? Does it follow through the root system and then explode nitrogen? Like, does it work as a conduit? Another thing I'm going to be talking about in the coming video. But obviously, it's got a solar association. It was used as Yule logs along with other trees, known to repel snakes. Sorry, I'm getting messages from people. Circle of ash causes adder to die. That was based off of one of Pliny's test acetaceans. But as we know, there were no snakes in Ireland, but there were plenty of ash. And it protects against sorcery. Eating the red buds at midsummer or carrying the keys in Scotland helped protect you against forms of sorcery, which we'll dive more into what that is later. So it's actually pretty good at working with its nature works well with weather because it's a good forecaster. So ashes that start leafing in a particular way, like when ashes start leafing before other trees, it predicts that it's going to be a wet summer. Oaks first indicate dry ones. So like if your ash tree is putting leaves out, new leaves before the oaks are, that usually means you're going to have a rainy, wet summer. But if the oaks come first, the leaves of the oaks come first, that usually predicts that you're going to have a dry summer. And then healing rituals often include passing children through the cleft or the warts, or the passing children through the clefts for warts and hernias and things like rickets that treats fate bound to the child. So as you would pass a child through sections of the tree that grew with boughs or anything like that, they believe that the tree itself would become bound to that child's fate. And then it's like that early myth of what kingliness was, that a king was connected to the land in some way. What happened to the king happened to the land. What happened to the land happened to the king. It's the same with this tree. I'll definitely have to try that with my child, but you're going to want to take care of that tree afterwards. You're going to want to enlist in taking personal stake in that tree's life for your own child's life. And of course, yeah, cutting it down is not good. And Breadhead laws is tied to women's contest of beauty, or basically if you were a woman and you were passed through one of these trees or brought into one of these trees, if the tree was to be beautiful, and if you're a child, the tree would blossom and be beautiful that coming summer, then the child would grow to be a beautiful woman. And if it was ugly, I'm sorry ladies, I have to say it like this, but if the tree died or was ugly or anything like that, then she would be relegated to spinning wool for her life. That was one story that was passed around. So often when you get some negative aspects, if you're doing the type of work that I was suggesting, where you start researching the trees and you get a particular vibe that's outside of a good feeling, I guess, you're going to be feeling a bit of a victim of circumstance and uncontrolled by cycles. But if you're able to form a positive relationship with this tree, you have positive experiences with it. It gives you positive images, positive things, I guess. Actually, there's one thing to do with the ash tree. If you were to go up to it, place your hand on a bough or sit within it or rest beneath it or something like that, you note the direction of the wind. They would say that, I think that one of the myths, it would say that a north wind meant that you were experiencing good luck. And if it was a south wind, you were going to be experiencing bad luck. So if you wanted to do some divining in that regard, if you were getting a south wind, you could probably be expecting to have to deal with circumstances outside of yourself. And then when you have a positive north wind coming as you embrace this tree or interact with this tree, you're going to get a lot of kind of maybe need to go with the flow and keep the momentum going. Work towards your manifestation and work towards the control that you can take in life. It's also a tree that represents abundance. And like I said, this is gonna be just hopefully not too long of an episode, because I'm not even halfway through the notes here. We've already done a good description, starting to move into some more of the medicinal aspects. We've got plenty more to go through, but the ash tree has extensive medical applications. The bark is a bitter astringent, a decoction of that treats liver and spleen obstructions, scalp rashes, fevers, and acts as a vermifuge. Oh, we lost somebody. All right, let's see. So vermifuge leaves are a laxative and a diuretic and a purgative. So I'm sure we know what that means. So basically a tea of like 1 to 2 teaspoons per half cup of water could address things like constipation, help with water retention, kidney stones, gout, jaundice, rheumatoidism. You want to harvest in the spring and dry them at that point, but avoid the time during the summer solstice due to high alkaloids. If you're going to be harvesting anything from the tree, make sure you're doing it in the spring on a dry day. In winter, you can use the bark or roots instead, or you can use the roots instead. You can simmer them in about a teaspoon or half cup of water, which will provide those leisure to those ailments that I mentioned before. From young twigs, like if you get young twigs, you need to break them down, break them off the tree, new growth basically, only to avoid harming the tree. If you get new growth, you can avoid cutting the bark open. If you have one that's semi-alive, you can go for the bark a bit, but new twigs are a good use for this too. It's good to flavor with mint, marjoram. The sap and juices relieve bladder stones. The sap and juices are used to relieve bladder stones and suppress appetites. If you're somebody who's trying to lose weight, and it's a good option there. Folklore includes unverified snake bite antidotes. So there's been some thoughts there. That's more an American First Nations solution. Among the Native American groups, it was the Cherokee used the white or black ash for bark tea for the liver and stomach issues. The Delaware ash was a cathartic and anemic solution. We'll just keep moving through some of these. The fox ash was good for sores, so skin type things. And kind of repeating information here. The Oregon ash was you could use the bark or the twigs for cleaning out worms. So if you're trying to do a deworming process, wow, that's pretty popular these days. Look into using Oregon ash. Do some, I guess, like I tell everybody every episode, do your own research. Make sure it's a good fit for you. Don't just take everything I say at face value. And you can make a wound poultice out of the roots. So you can mash them, you can soak them and mash them and make a poultice that you'd place on open wounds. This is all for people who like to do wilderness stuff, right? Be outside. These are solutions that you can have. And as I mentioned before, once I complete this entire series, I'm going to give this entire document out to the server. It's going to have all the information, more than I've listed in it, for you to use for your families and as a reference for the future. It's going to be a digital copy that you can search up things within to find. Yeah. Woodland. So that's the thing. It's pretty common where you are in Europe, but I struggle to find it where I am actually out here in North Carolina. Let's see. There's charms involved as well. There was classic charms built by boiling 2 ounces of crushed leaves in a quart of water, simmering for about an hour, straining and sweetening and reciting. No, we won't go through that one right there. We're not going to go through that one. Basically, what you'd want to do is you'd want to basically make like a tea out of this and sweeten it using the leaves to claim some sort of divine advice. You would drink that sort of mixture to open your mind up for divine inspiration. It goes back into using that sap, that honey, right? So if you were to get the leaves, boil them, mash them, and then sweeten it with that sappy material that they had, it was said to provide a bit of like enlightenment, which ties into Wodan's ability to enlighten himself. And that's just it's just interesting how the stories of Odin's enlightenment comes from a tree that has the materials there that are meant to help with your neural pathways. It's just interesting how our ancestors knew these things and told it to us through these histories and lessons of heroes. Moving into Celtic spiritual significance, this part I'll try to blow through pretty quick. In Celtic traditions, the ash tree holds the 5th position in the Ogham alphabet, corresponds to the letter N, and we said it was neen. That's what the old Irish word was. Its word Ogham evokes themes of disruption and creativity. Checking of the peace reflects how ash spears shafts shatter tranquility in battle, while flight boasts of beauty. These are kennings that I've woven through this. Let's see. So one of the other things that ties us to Odin, and this is more of like, this is in the Celtic section that I have here, but it's actually the ash embodies the magician's will and is a potent extension of the magician. So having wands, right? I don't necessarily put too much faith in wands, like you craft them and you shoot spells like Harry Potter or anything like that. But if you were to think about a branch coming down off of a tree and landing in a particular way or landing beside you or something like that, that could be a way for you to interpret the north or southern wind that I was speaking about, or even understanding the direction in which you're supposed to be sending your energy. And if we look at it in the cross of the 4 elements, or if you look at it in the star of the 5 elements, you could see what element, if you were to understand the north, south, and all of that, you could understand what element you should be focusing on. That's what that wand idea comes from, right? Like it's a stick that shoots fireballs or freezes people or anything like that, that modern invention. But no, if you were just to imagine a branch falling and then you were able to discern the direction in which it's essentially growing towards or was growing towards as it fell, then you could understand, okay, I need to work with air, I need more air elements in my life. Might be woo for some people, but give it a shot. Just little tools for you guys to get along with. Let's see, embodies the magician's will. It's often equated to Lu, and his fiery spear from the other world, the city of Glorious, which overcomes inertia and extends one's reach. over crises. And then there we go. We lost the guy that I was hoping to chime in on that, but reaches over into crises. Invocations to Lu, such as the shining of Lu, of the long arm, keeper of the fiery spear. Imagining these things in your mind kind of helps with that ability to progress forward and create momentum. If you were to do some research into Lu and what his power represents mentally, as I've said, a way to combat the mindset you want to take with an ash is that of a warrior. You want to imagine what it does for a warrior, how this benefited warrior tribes. So that's the idea here, is pressing through things, pressing through the warrior band, as a warrior band. So you really have to look within yourself to understand, what does that mean for me? Do I need to unite with people? Do I need to press forward? Do I need to stand to be noble? These are all the mental exercises you can do to get yourself over and through what you're dealing with. And often it requires some form of transformation and change, either being physical, mental, or spiritual. Those can relate to the elements, as I was mentioning before, and there's often, and when we think about this tree and how it's connected to many other realms, how it's connected to realms, we have to understand that a ripple in one vibrates through the tree to affect all. And that's the one of the things you have to understand, is that your actions don't just ripple through the fabric of the realm that you're within. They ripple through time and space. So the effects that you do for your life now may appear in the future. Or Nathaniel and I mentioned this in, I think, one of the last episodes, but you can affect your past. And what I mean by that is that you can affect your perception of the past. So what you do for yourself now currently can create perspective that allows you to interpret the past differently. And it's not time travel. It's not anything advanced. It's being said in a woo-woo kind of way. But the reality of it is that when you understand the transformative power that this tree takes in its own life, you can understand how to use that in your own life. And then what you can do is you can enhance the experiences of your past and change them, just like you would change the future. Spears in here. Hi. So, yeah, moving on. In ancient Ireland's it's one of Ireland's 5 sacred trees. Yeah, we can see your chats. Yeah. Glad you made it back. I thought I sent you out of here when I brought in Lou. I thought I'd said something wrong, and I was like, oh man, the scholar left me. Yeah, glad everybody's here. I'm glad I'm getting to speak with people. This is really something I love to do. So let's see, moving on, we've got the ash. And like I said before, the rowan also is like a warrior tree, but it also represents an aspect of the warrior. It's not like everything can mean, everything is connected. All these trees can mean the same thing, but in different capacities. You know what I mean? So this is straightforward. Like, this means the ash tree is a warrior. It goes forward. There's a reason it's related to Wodan. He was a warrior. Look at all his names that are related to that. Think about his spear. Think about Lou's spear. All the spears in history, from the Proto-European, Indo-Europeans, they were made from ash. And just what does that symbolism represent, right? So, the trees were for the Druids. Unfortunately, that's at the very end, and we'll do that later. Falling upon the spear. That's a good one. Spears here. I like that. Spears here for the spears talk. I like that. Yes. Yeah. There's the Fraxus Carolina. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Covers the whole eastern half of the state. Also that I'm right nearby you. I live in. Oh, cool. Hey man, we might have to meet up here soon. I know we are trying to plan a visit. That's good. I have been searching. I live in what's considered the highlands. So I can't, I've been struggling to find one of those. Anyways, we're going to move forward and keep trying to get past this. All right, so more into the Norse right here, and this is what I think a lot of people have been waiting for. In the Norse mythology, the ash is central to Yggdrasil, and I don't know, I say this differently all the time. There's Yggdrasil, but I like to say Yggdrasil. And in the cosmic, or known as the cosmic world tree, where it's also the translation is almost quite literally Odin's horse. It's the axis of the 9 worlds, with mead in its branches and honey from its leaves. That's what I was talking about with that sap. Possibly inspired, again, by Soma and all that sort of stuff. It's sprinkled by the Norns and Raudaz well. Hopefully I pronounced that one correctly. And of course, Odin hung from the tree for 9 days to discover the ruins. Now, was he setting out to discover the ruins? Did he know the ruins were there? Probably not. Symbolizing it's a sacrifice for wisdom. That's what we have to do. And when I'm talking about moving forward and creating momentum, it's just like the law of nature. You don't get anything without sacrificing something. And when you take something from this tree, the tree's sacrificing and you're getting something, but like, what are you giving back? That's why we do offerings, those sort of things. But in Norse mythology, the first man, known as Ask, was made from the ash tree. And as I said earlier, a majority of the Northern European languages refer to the ash tree as Ask. It rivals the oak in the Indo-European reverence. Of course, the manna ash, already mentioned. In Icelandic, Aske signifies a great blazing fire, underscoring its power to be a provider of wood brought in for Yule. We can verify that it was brought in for Yule time simply through the language. Twigs were used for rune staves. Odin's spear was also ash. It has affinities to storms. So there's a lot of storm affinity to it, as we mentioned before, because it's a great attractor of storms. Let's see. Yeah, it grows in the UB36. Anyways, so one thing that people talk about is plant whites or like plant spirits and how they usually manifest around these types of trees. And the plant white in this one usually appears as like a silver gray robed figure with wind and rain essence, or like an ocean breeze, or like the feeling of being close by a river, having chiseled old features, brown hair, gray, either brown hair, but all often gray eyes, usually reflecting that of like a magician in a way. And that's kind of one of those images of Odin, right? So when you do like manifestation work and you think about like what the tree manifests as, is you try to communicate with it, you're probably thinking of like the elder, the old warrior in a way. Is what you're going to look for, unless it's a young tree. Sorry, pardon. Great for doing any type of work for honoring ancestors because of its ability to connect and interact with the other realms. So any type of work you do to honor ancestors, that it's either fires or creating altars, weapon sacrifices, tool sacrifices, things like that. The ash is a great one for that because you can carry the intent as you destroy it and send it off into its other existence. Also known as the Anzu's rune. That one is the divine voice, or some people just say a god. That's what they refer to it as, but I refer to it as the divine voice. If you can imagine, and some sort of deep meditation, deep type of work, even the practice of just crafting tools or creating a spear or something along those lines. In that process of like deep focus, you can often hear, like in your subconscious, the divine voice guiding you from another realm. Of course, a solo tree. There's another interesting story in the shamanic use for the Celtic. There's Gwydion, who was yes, asking Old English. Yeah, I think I don't know if you're with me from the beginning, but I have a whole section about all that. Didn't get the Old English, though. I had the Anglo-Saxon, that's what it was. But more in the Celtic of the shamanic type work. Gwydion had a wand. He was a figure in Celtic mythology who had a wand that raised storms and curses and created invisibility and shape shifting. So he's a figure that's tied to working with ash in like this sort of like weather type way, right? Working with weather. And I always feel a particular way. I feel a particular energy when I know a thunderstorm is coming. It feels like a good time to do a lot of work, to go outside and do some commuting. I have instructions on how to craft a spear, but I won't read those. I'll let you guys read that. These are actually based off of some old ancient Irish practices, which I'll leave in this. Obviously, who is one of the gods is pretty much the god you're going to want to do research in when you're looking into the U. If you're into the Celtic, you want to, yeah, I'll send a little something at the chat after the chat. If you're going to work with this and you want to, and it really helps too. So we have here that I'd like to mention that we see the Celtic analog of Odin hanging on the windy tree is found in the boyhood deeds of Fionn mac Cumhail, which where he catches the salmon of knowledge. Here, the world tree is in fact 9 hazels. Yeah, because I remember the hazelnuts, doesn't the salmon eat them? Containing the hazels of knowledge, which drop into the well of Sayas and Ecton, I believe, and imparts a knowledge into the immortal salmon that dwells in the waters. You can't get it all fast enough. See, this is the thing. You have to come be in the chat. You gotta be talking with me. Yep. The web of weird as well. That's the other one. See, there's so much crossover, and that's why I wanted to make something that blended um the two cultures together. Because they're just they're really so integral to, I think, resurrecting the old ways. Guys, I think we might only get through one tree and one herb. this might become a longer series than I. All right, so we're gonna let Jasper come in and do a little bit real quick. Hello,
Hello, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Awesome. So, yeah, I'm not super prepared for this. My first podcast, actually, but this particular, call it laboring for knowledge. We can see this example in obviously Odin on the Windy Tree. And as I said, Fionn McCool, it's cool. The MH is pronounced wah in Irish, so it's cool.
See, I thought I just get so many of these deities mixed up because this is the new field that I'm studying.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sven McCool, what an awesome name.
Well, it's not your fault. So Irish actually, especially modern Irish, is very difficult. It has 4 different dialects and there's different spellings and pronunciations based on the dialect. Irish is really hard, man.
Currently, I'm studying Icelandic, so that's just where my brain power's at. But please continue.
So yeah, Finn McCool, he labors under the trees at the waters, just like Odin labors under the tree at the water, because we all know that the well of Erd lies beneath Yggdrasil, where Mimir's well. It's where all the knowledge comes from. The Norns live there as well. And they actually paint the tree with the waters from the well, which turns the tree white. And there's a tale in Irish myth called the Hunt of Slieve Quillen. And in that tale, Fionn McCool swims a lake beside a tree, the lake of the Cailleach, which turns all things white, that lake. And then he fasts under the tree in order to gain knowledge and in the power of prophecy. A separate story from the catching of the salmon of knowledge, but the same analog, the same story in reality, and also the same story as Odin laboring on the windy tree. And then we also have this story, I believe, present in the myth of Apollo chasing after Daphne. So Apollo chases Daphne, and while he chases her, he laments and labors in his inability to love her. And then she turns into the laurel tree, which he makes, the prophetic. It's in the actual poem, it refers to them, the leaves of the laurel, as the prophetic leaves. And actually, we can see in several Greek sources that the Pythian oracle would chew the laurel tree, the laurel leaves, to gain knowledge, and would also hold a laurel branch as she sat on the omphalos, which is the omphalos is the stone in Apollo's temple, is another example of the axis mundi that you mentioned earlier, which is like the navel of the world. So it's kind of all these things kind of wrap in together in a very interesting and esoteric way.
How would you, if you were just to run through that and summarize very quickly, putting those things together? What's the nexus? What's the one thing tying all these things together? What's the one element?
The one element is a certain god type or deity type labors beneath a tree to gain knowledge, specifically to gain wisdom. And it's usually an overpowering wisdom or like a prophetic power. Specifically, Odin hangs on the tree, Fionn catches the fish or swims the lake and then fasts, and Apollo chases after Daphne and then never is able to get her love, which is the analog for his labor, but receives the prophetic leaves of the laurel afterwards.
See, and when I was talking about in the beginning all of the spiritual work that can be done in this, I think the stories that you just provided lend to that too.
Yeah,
In the work,
I
yeah, go
think
ahead.
the main thing here is it's like an ascetic practice. It's like an act of asceticism and sacrifice in order to gain knowledge specifically. And it's kind of a more specific analog of the whole Indo-European thing. We have to sacrifice in order to get something. You give to get. That's our whole deal.
And that is just right in line with what I was talking about, how this is related to shape shifting, which is also just transformation in a lot of
Exactly.
ways.
Yeah.
So that's what happens as you do the work, as you create sacrifice, as you commit to your labors or your task, as you break through your inertness and you find your momentum, you create change within yourself, you create transformation. The task, the work is what transforms you in a way.
Exactly.
Would you say?
Exactly. I agree 100%. It's the engagement. And I think that's one of the biggest things. You could look at this through even like a Jungian psychological lens. I feel like, especially, Odin, this god type has a lot to do with engaging with your shadow, past traumas, and understanding, how your life has caused you to sacrifice to gain the experience that you have. So, I think this is all, yeah, it's very much about the engagement with the suffering, basically. And I don't necessarily think like a lot of modern philosophies that there's this attempt of liberation from suffering. You have to engage with and integrate that suffering. You have to actually labor beneath the tree to gain that knowledge.
And that's something that I try to impress upon people all the time is that you can't be a spectator in your life. You can't, and it's so much of what our industrialized world wants to do and why it's so important for us to reawaken the ways of our ancestors is because the modern world wants you to be complacent. It wants you to sit, it wants you to just consume content and be a spectator to your life, allow life to happen around you. And how do you break through all that? You do the work. And how do we find that? We go into the natural world, just like our ancestors did. Just because we live in a space now where we put ourselves in a box and we're safe, we can't live 100% safe. That's not a life. We have to be able to engage with risk and loss and allow ourselves to transform and change and be present in our lives. I think you've made a great point. Maybe that's not the point you were trying to make, but I think you've led to some really great.
No, that's absolutely the point I was trying to make, actually. I really do think that's the point. I think that's the entire essence of dealing with this god type in general. If you take the reconstructed Proto-Indo-European god, we're speaking of, Rudros, or Rudlos, and which is the dual-natured, terrible, and benevolent god of the Koryos, the Koryos is all about transformation, from being transformation from a young man into a man who is capable of being a productive part of society. That's the whole reason for the Koryos or the Indo-European warband. And so this god being the patron of that, his existence is all about really discovering that, engaging with that, and that transformation. I had something else there and I lost it.
Maybe this will jog your memory. We have a suggestion from one of our community members to read stanza 16 of the Have 'em All. And we have it here. The coward believes he will ever live if he keeps himself safe from strife, but old age leaves him not long in peace, though spears may spare his life. Pretty good pull.
Yeah, good pull. Good pull. That's
That's
a
a good
beautiful
one.
one.
That is a good one. See, look how good this is. Everybody's coming together. Man, if we had Nathaniel here, he'd be just going nuts. Well, if you don't mind, I think we're only going to do one tree today, which actually works out because this actually completes the, I think it's the Acme or the Amy, or I can't really quite understand the Irish of it, but it's the quadrant of the OM that we're in, which is the first five, and then it's 555.
Okay.
So maybe we'll just make this one. I'll try to work on getting this information a bit shorter, or maybe we can only just do one at a time. But I want to move into the herb that I paired with this. And so with this one, I chose vervain, known botanically as a Verbena officinalis. It's a perennial herb that grows up to 2 feet tall, thriving in various climates, often found in waste grounds by roadsides and meadows across Europe. It's a common derivative of the Celtic vervain, but with F's, meaning repelling stones, highlighting its historical use for expelling gallstones. In Latin, the verbena means beneficent green, general term for sacred altar plant. What is it? The hierabotene translates to sacred plant. Folk names reflect it as a revered status, reflect its revered status through Britannica. Well, these are just the names: Britannica, verbena, enchantress plant, holy wort, herba sacra, herb of enchantment, Juno's tears, ironwort, all these other different names, right? But yeah, I could go into the Danish and all that stuff. But it's associated with deities like the Norns, the Norn fates. It's historically, while many herbs were brought to Rome or brought from Rome to the Celtic culture, vervain actually traveled outside. So vervain traveled from the Celtic region to Rome. So it's one of the plants that actually made it back the other way, underscoring its ancient sacred role in rituals and medicine, right? Well, that just means that it is a reflection of how the pagan mentality was actually somewhat adopted. And that's a proof right there, because if it was a locally grown plant in the Celtic regions, there must have been some significance that they wanted to bring it back with them. Let's see. Pretty much an all-purpose herb tied to protection, healing, and other magical works, with affinities often associated with opals and agates. So you can usually find where these grow. They used to be able to find in mines where these would grow, or what they would be able to harvest these types of. That's how they would help locate, like large quantities of this herb would actually kind of denote there being opals and agates or agates in that region. Let's see. We'll just keep going through here. It was used by swordsmiths to quench blades and its water for strengthening iron. So they would throw a lot of this in their quenching water because of the properties that it gave to the water to help quench the blades more solidly in a way. And they would also make oils out of it, and they rub it on tools to strengthen blacksmith tools. So that ties also into that idea of work and labor and craft right there. Household uses also include infusions for like hair tonic and stuff like that. But its relation to the ash tree comes from, let's see, considered a magician's plant. I know we're talking about warriors and things like that. The ash tree being considered oftentimes also the magician's tree. That comes from what I would imagine tales about Wodan, maybe a bit of mix of history where, Wodan was the magician. I believe he was an alchemist, but he also took on many different shapes.
I'd like to pipe in that
Yeah.
that from my knowledge in the Germanic traditions, actually the spear and the wand are somewhat synonymous. And this god type that we're speaking of, who Odin is, he's he's a spear god, always associated with a spear or a wand of
A spear shaker, it's all of his names. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. We see that kind of dropped in. Well, I won't talk about the whole Indo-European spear of this god, but we can definitely see associations with spears and wands. And I think this is kind of a some would say spear. I think this is kind of this is a god of liminality, and we traditionally associate sorcery, magic, wizardry, alchemy, those kind of things with academia and thus with like physical inaction. And then we associate warriors, with physical action and not with academia or brain power. And I think this god brings both of those things together. I think that's one of the essential like understanding points here.
Yes.
And then just to piggyback on the Vervain thing and the iron, some interesting names in Central and Eastern European languages are all around iron. It's called the true iron herb, the medical iron herb, iron grass, and iron hard.
Ironwort, quite a lot here. I have a huge list of names.
And
But yeah, you're right.
curiously is considered in later after Christianization to have been one of the herbs that staunched Jesus's wounds after his removal from the cross. And it's just very interesting that this herb has the ability to heal, but also to create weaponry, to create death. And that's one of the key aspects of, again, this god, which is that he is both terrible and benevolent. Like Odin is very much known to be the god of medicine in the Germanic realm
That's
because
one reason why I believe he was an alchemist for sure.
right. I mean, you've heard the nine herbs charm, I'm sure. It's attributed to Odin. Apollo too is known to be the god of healing, healing music, healing poetry, but also I can't remember it's Apollo Paean, I think Paen is one of his epithets, and he's considered to be primarily a healing god there. Rudra as well in the Vedic sphere is also a god of poison and medicine and is the chief yogi as well, which is the art on the Indian subcontinent of self-transformation and healing, especially of the spirit. But then Rudra is the most terrifying god of destruction as well. So, this duality is so, so important for understanding what we're working with here.
Well, that leads into some of the things I'm reviewing through my huge list of notes. I mean, when you were talking about being a healing herb as well, it was known to work as a sedative and a detoxifier and a hormone balancer. But as well as being a sedative, you would have to think that those in war or those who are dealing with extreme wounds that need to be treated or anything like that, they would want to deal with some sedatives, right? But to help them relax. But let's see, where was it? Right here. I mean, also just to also relate it back to why it's also kind of related to the warrior aspect. It was used all the time to finish spears. They would make an oil from it and they would use it to refinish spears and weaponry as well, not just the iron tools of a blacksmith. But there was right here. So it was saying that it was said that it was used in cauldrons and bowls to create a medicine that would kind of bring you into like not really an altered state, but it would be relaxing and calming. And they believed that it was an herb that would be used in the well of, I see it was here. The well of Erda. That was the one you were mentioning, right?
It was, in fact, yes. That's the well that
Yes.
Odin drinks the mead of poetry from.
Yeah, and it said that Vervain was a part of it, used for helping create clarity and fate seeing. But having that part of that, using that as a way to sort of stabilize vision, or at least calm somebody into a state of being able to see things more clearly. Because if you think about it now, especially in this day and age, everyone's so manic, nobody can calm down. Everyone
Yeah.
has to do things, you know?
Very interesting. I don't know how much you know about the Indo-European sacred drink, but it's something that a lot of us are kind of questing for different there are different recipes of it. Yeah, soma,
What?
Bjorn.
Some
Yeah, soma, that which is pressed, which is also, if you know of kvasir,
Glacier, yeah.
that also
That was made.
that means that which is pressed. It literally means that. So, and kvasir is who is being made into the mead of poetry, which is the Germanic sacred drink. And the waters in the well of Sagais that the salmon swims in are in fact the sacred drink in the Irish or Celtic version. But so we don't really know what like the recipe is. Like there's potentially an entheogenic mix of things that cause some sort of maybe psychotropic or psychoactive state potentially. We could do a whole thing, like a whole long podcast on the sacred drink, and I could bring in a lot of stuff that I've researched. Many people have gone after this. Has had some like really heavy scholarly work put into it as well. And it's interesting to me, maybe vervain could be one of these ingredients, you know?
It's throughout history, it's been referred to as the enchanter's plant. It was used to it's used to aid in dream work and offered protection during, shamanic work, or even in the work of the priest class or the healer class of those are the Celtic and the Germanic. But also it was usually a part of Utiseta as well, as that people would try to find spaces
Really?
of vervain that they would sit within to perform a Utiseta. And that's why it was often said that it was used in the lap. They would bring it, like bunches of it, and they'd sit with it in their lap to create the aroma, freshly cut. And I think they would also probably put some in water. It was used, pardon. But I just wanted to throw that one in there for people, that this is definitely something to keep your eye on, keep researching. I have a lot written down for it. Can I type it? Yes, I can type it for you. Vervain. There you are.
It's also, I'm reading here that it's sometimes considered an ally of poets and writers, because it can relax you enough to relieve writer's block, which is interesting. Goes back to what you were talking about with inertia concerning ash, the ash tree. It's a good pairing. This is a really good pairing.
I would think a lot of that too, because it's like, if we think about it, because this is what it's all about, right? When I was talking to you about the symbol is like what Ohm really is,
Uh-huh.
it's not. I mean, a lot of people think it's just another rune set, right? But that's not really what it is. It's like a living divination set that surrounds you, right? It's land knowledge. It's a way of creating understanding, like we would by casting runes, but in reality, it's just a matter of understanding the natural earth, and finding your messages in these living organisms. Finding that symbology that guides your mind, because the human mind is just, it's plagued now more than ever with its uncontrollable nature,
Yeah.
right? And something like the vervain, for if we think about it in a warrior mindset, it's not always a matter of charging in and being the biggest and loudest. Sometimes you have to be very careful,
Uh-huh.
and you got to create clarity, and you got to understand your environment. You got to understand your enemy. You have to understand what the objective is, and you have to move very precisely. So as much as it's being a warrior is about strength and forward momentum, and the momentum doesn't always have to be blazing.
Yeah.
It can be thought out, right? Just as we're talking about, doing the craft, doing the work creates the solution, right? Or it allows the divine echo to happen within you, right? Sometimes you have to toil to find the answer.
Yeah, it does. And I think that, the whole Indo-European worldview and all of the descendant traditions are really, it's so much about balance. And that sounds so simple. Yeah, there you go, Formbjorn. You're right. But yeah, I think it's all about creating balance. Yeah, sorry, that threw me off. I I
Sorry.
am a no, you're good. I'm a martial artist myself, and so I agree with that wholeheartedly. Control is the most important thing. But yeah, I think finding the balance is the most important, and people don't understand that. true balance and equality is like the interaction of positive and negative, of loss and gain. It's like that interaction point between them. That's what really living is. It's not having all gain or causing all loss. It's about, if you play music, then you know what an interval is. It's the sound between two notes. And that's what really causes interesting things in music. And so it's that interval, it's that interaction between the duality that is really where you find, quote unquote Zen or whatever you want to call it.
I would lend something to that, considering that I think one of the most important things we need to do as a society now is authentically engage in the arts. That's what the Celtic ancestors were held in very high regard, but engaging in the arts in an authentic way, not just for clout, not just for these things or the other. But when I was studying acting, one of the biggest things I found that really created power in a moment was the silence. It wasn't the character screaming. If somebody was able to create powerful silence, the reduction of, how would I say it? It's basically, it's when something happens and you don't immediately react, it creates a suspense, creates a greater impact for the audience, for the other person in the scene, if you can work with that really well. So I mean, I would agree with you that yeah, it's in those moments of interval, I guess, where you would find a lot of the real awareness.
Yeah.
If I'm not too tired and losing it.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, like um, I play the bass guitar, but when I learned to play guitar, I learned that one of the most important things is being a lead guitar player is not shredding constantly, but it's learning how to use space like you're talking about, literally. I mean, silence is so impactful. Sometimes if you just don't play, I mean, we could say this with fighting too. Sometimes if you just don't strike or if you just don't be there, then it's about what you're not doing so often rather than about what you're doing.
I would agree. Absolutely.
And then just as a little tidbit for anyone who's itching to get a spear, old pool sticks are made of ash most often. So if you can find an old pool stick, like a these are earlier, maybe early 2000s pool stick, or just, Google ash pool stick, you got yourself a spear, a modern spear. Most of them come in carrying cases. You can keep it on you.
Well, it's just like we were saying, you have to be very cautious
Yeah.
when you're playing billiards.
And I have to credit that to Thor from Norse Magic and Beliefs. He's actually where I heard that from.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I think we've done a good job here, everyone. I think that might be a good point to wrap it up because it's getting.
Basically, to get a spear.
Yeah.
Or make a
Everyone get a spear.
I think every man should own a spear. I have one. Mine's a boar hunting spear, so it's got a short handle. But I've been looking into getting or even making my own. I need to get a lathe. I will say,
Stick.
go ahead.
No, I said at the very least a walking stick.
Yeah. Well, actually, we'll get to a really good violent walking stick that the Irish. I think you might know. Do you know? You want to give? Do you know what they would love to make it from?
Blackthorn.
Yeah, there you go. Nice, beautiful.
Blackthorn
Yeah,
is
we're gonna
actually
get.
the sort of terrible counterpart to hawthorn, the benevolent.
It is.
Both associated with the she. They love to grow on burial mounds.
I know. That's the thing. Yeah, I've gone through my woods and I've found plenty of spaces where hawthorn have started growing, and I'm just like, what died here?
Right?
But
All right.
we won't get too much further into that one. I think it's just the ash and vervain this time, guys. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll try to compress it and get two next time. Maybe it's better just one-on-one. But I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everyone that's watching this on YouTube. Thanks for coming to Folklore. You can come and join the Discord. Links in the description. Just to watch, like, comment, any of those things, questions you might have, just come on by and join in the conversation, join in the debate, because we don't awaken our DNA alone. We do it together.
Yeah,
We
we are
do
a
it by
people of
sharing.
community.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Our ancestors didn't live without each other. They didn't make it on their own. They made it together. And that's what we have to do now.